respect that is demanded. So the judge comes out, and what does everybody do? They rise. That doesn't really happen in our society.
Right.
If you go to church on Sundays, you'll see people wearing shorts and T-shirts and chewing gum, and it's one of the last bastions of formality.
Sure.
Do you think that's a good thing?
I think so. I think you have to have utmost respect for what happens in there, because I'm a third party. I'm coming in there, I'm keeping tabs, but I have to constantly remember that it's a very, as I said, a very solemn thing that happens there. Lives are changed, lives are ruined in that little room. So I think you do have to keep it very seriously. It has to be a tight ship. Yeah, sure.
When you think about what articles you want to write, how do you come up with ideas?
Well, it's various things. Sometimes it's just checking on the system. Obviously, criminal courts aren't always too hard to cover. There's a docket every day. You can check what's coming up, what cases are more serious or not. And then other times you're just looking for what we call enterprise stories that you just come up with on your own, looking for certain trends, things like that. I recently did a story on license suspensions because I remembered that there were certain developments in the law that were looking at, Sussex County in particular, how it was very difficult for people in a rural suburban area to drive from, to be able to get around if they don't have a driver's license. There's bus routes, but there aren't enough. You can't get to where they have to work. So on the one hand, you're trying to have these people live, competent lifestyles, rebuild their lives in cases, but they can't get to work, can't get to rehab, things like that. So it's taking a look at how the courts are recognizing that hardship factor more and more, and allowing people, in some cases, like such as a mandatory suspension for a drug offense, to keep that license and keep the financial sanctity of their family, things like that.
Well, that's a problem, right? The courts recognize that there's a difficulty for people living in Sussex County, where there's train and bus issues, and but the court is saying you must pay us this fine every month, and then you have the defendant saying, well, but I can't go to work without a license, and how can I pay you? And so what happens oftentimes, unfortunately, is they'll drive anyway with a license suspension, get picked up, it'll be their second offense, the fines go up. To pay that, they have to go to work, so guess what they do? They drive again. And so I recently represented, I was involved with the case, and I believe 27th driving while suspended, and people are like, how could you possibly be so callous or so disinterested in the law, ignorant of your responsibility to go 27 times? And you know what? He's got to pay the bills, and the courts are thinking about that. Some of the jurisdictions have what's called a work license. You could go to work, and that's it. But we're not there. And I don't know that we are.
I had mentioned that in the article that Pennsylvania and New York, they have some kind of restricted license.
Right.
There's also an assemblyman in New Jersey who has a packet of bills that deal with this issue, and one of them is to introduce a restricted license. An attorney said, yeah, we don't have it, but we should. So.
When you do your article, do you find yourself challenged or confronted with realities that you are surprised by? In other words, many people in any profession, medicine, psychology, the law, when you're outside looking in, it's very different than talking to the insiders looking out.
Sure.
Have you found that?
Yeah, to some degree. I think take an issue like Megan's Law, obviously a highly charged issue, and rightfully so. If you're looking at it on the inside perspective, you see how certain offenders cycle in and out of jail because they're not understanding how they register, etc. But if you're looking at it from the outside, you're saying, a lot of people are saying, like I said, it's a controversial issue, saying punish, punish, punish. I can't believe these people. How can they do this? But when you're on the inside, you see certain realities in that, on the one hand, they're supposed to register an address, have a competent lifestyle. On the other hand, there's someone on a Megan's Law registry. It's not easy for them to find a job. It's not easy for them to get a residence. So they're couch surfing, and they're not doing what they need to do. Some people just, turn their nose up at the law. Some people just don't realize what they're supposed to do. But that's kind of a difference between seeing it from the inside and the challenges there versus someone from the outside saying, what's with these people,
When you write for the newspaper, do you have freedom to go in any direction you want, or do you have an editorial staff or maybe some other reporters who say, been there, done that, we don't want to revisit this issue, or maybe this isn't the kind of topic that we feel is appropriate?
Sure. Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of dialogue, both between me and my fellow reporters and also my editors. We talk constantly during the day. It's just a fluid process about what's coming up this week, what we're working on that day for tomorrow's paper, because it's the daily miracle. You have to have something every day, and so there's a lot of dialogue about what's appropriate, what's not, what's worth covering, what's not, what we've already reported versus what needs an update. So it's definitely a constant dialogue, but there is room to come up with your own ideas, definitely. And there are times where, editor hears something and say, do this, So.
Do you have a favorite story that you could think of in all of the columns that you've been writing regarding the law?
As far as articles go, we always joke about this one case at the Herald. There was a pack of 20-somethings who thought it'd be a good idea to go to a local hotel in the Newton area. And they brought 21 pounds of pudding to them. Those, they brought
This already sounds good.
Yeah. Well, what's funny about the story is it was Monday. It was the calendar call, and I was sitting there, and I was like, I have nothing for tomorrow's paper.
Right.
Nothing's going on. And I see the assistant prosecutor lean back, and he goes, so we're talking a lot of pudding, right? We're talking 21 pounds? And I perked up. I was like, what? And it turns out these folks, this trio, decided to bring in 3 of those, they're like real big, feeding army 7-pound cans from Costco.
Right.
They checked in to a nice suite, real nice, and they just opened, I think it was 2 chocolate, 1 vanilla, very important details, and they opened up and they just flung it around the suite and just covered everything. I saw pictures from the police, and there was like a mirror. You wouldn't know it was a mirror because it was slish-sloshed, a nice chocolate vanilla swirl, and it just ruined the suite, and I think they tried to settle it civilly, but they end up pleading guilty in criminal mischief, and these folks, it ended up snowballing. One got put in PTI, and then
tell our audience what PTI is.
It's pretrial intervention. It's a chance. It's like a diversion program, so you're not actually prosecuted if you behave for a certain amount of time. But yeah, it just snowballed. It was actually a perfect example of how something silly like that can snowball into a very serious legal problem. Not only do they plead guilty to a crime, they end up, violating the probation, etc.
Right.
But that was a fun story because I got to use a lot of double entendres. Say, it wasn't sanctioned by Bill Cosby. Hotel employee found the unsavory aftermath.
The unsavory aftermath.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty savory. I like the vanilla and the chocolate together.
I mean, that was a fun one. It's a little silly, but it's a fun one that we talked about.
You know what I think some people don't get is that what used to be tolerated by the law and used to be just, boys will be boys, isn't anymore.
No.
So I can remember there was a time where it was acceptable for someone who was driving well to have an open beer in the car. They're driving, and every now and then take a swig. They're not drunk. They're just driving with an open container. Not tolerated anymore. I remember as a kid playing war in a house that was abandoned, and it's a great place to play war, right?
Yeah.
It's illegal. It's trespassing, and you can't do the things that perhaps once were allowed. Do you find that we're a more regulated society than maybe in the past?
Especially in New Jersey, like I said before, you need a permit for a BB gun, etc. I think a lot of it is because the legislature only goes in one way. It goes in the way of, lowering the blood alcohol level. It goes in the way of further requiring permits for guns. It's not going to go the other way. And you could argue, obviously, rightfully so, it makes society safer, etc. But even if you could find a rational reason to kind of take your foot off the pedal, not many legislators are going to say, no, let's diminish punishment, because that's just not how it works.
Right.
They don't want to look soft on crime or anything. So I think that's kind of why you see more and more regulation as opposed to not.
Well, what are your personal thoughts on that? I don't want to put you on the spot as a reporter. I know you like to stay objective.
Sure.
But now let's think. In the last decades, not even, we have, you should wear your seatbelt, to, if you're caught speeding and you're not wearing your seatbelt, you'll get in trouble, to, we can now stop you for not wearing a seatbelt, it's the law. If you're riding a bike, you better have a helmet on. If your child